because, you know, it's a journey when you have a dyslexic child, and, you know, it is definitely a journey. So let me tell you, I'm a single mom of 4 kids, first of all. And my oldest son is the one that is dyslexic, and he's very dyslexic. And for years, I could not put my finger on why certain behaviors were happening, why he didn't like to read. Why I couldn't even get him to learn the alphabet when he was in preschool. Like, we fought over it. And I thought he was just being stubborn. And hindsight is always 2020. And looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have known. I wouldn't have been so hard on him. And first of all, I just want to tell your parents, like, we are all just doing our best, and you have to give yourself grace, because even impactful parents do not do things right the first time around. And so it's about being impactful, is about learning and growing in your parenting skills. And I definitely had to do that with my dyslexic child. And today we're thriving. So I want to tell you about that. So it's exciting.
That's a great story. I know it. I always tell people that dyslexia is kind of like a war that's fought battle by battle to get to the end, and that you're not going to solve it all in one day. And if you go in with the mentality that you're going to figure it all out right now, that's not happening.
No, it's not. And which is perfect segue, because my tip number one to be an impactful parent of a dyslexic child is, first thing you got to do is figure out what you're dealing with, because dyslexia is a spectrum, and there's lots of different places on that spectrum. And can I tell you, oh my goodness, the journey of that was probably the toughest, most frustrating, most agonizing journey of being a parent that I could say, of one of the things that I've been through. And there's always something that seems to couple with dyslexia, not always, but it just seems like really, really often. And so for my son, the first signs I saw was his extreme activity. And at first I thought, well, maybe he has ADHD or something, but he didn't. Actually, he had sensory processing disorder, or still does. And that was coupled with our dyslexia. And when you have more than one issue that you're trying to figure out what's going on, I think that even just makes everything a little bit more complicated, as if dyslexia wasn't complicated enough all on its own. Like, there's just always something, it seems like, that always couples with it. And for us, it was sensory processing disorder. So like, I started seeing things in the beginning. I said he didn't want to learn his alphabet. He didn't want, he was a super, super active kid. And it turns out that he was sensory seeking. So he needs more input for him particularly. And sitting down to read, not a lot of input for him, on top of being very difficult. So talk about a double whammy of not something you really want to do as a kid. And he couldn't understand why he had to learn how to read. Like, to him, in his very early 5-year-old brain, why do I need to learn how to read? It'll be fine. Because he didn't really see the value in it. And so it was an uphill battle. But through that, as I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm dealing with, and nobody would tell me, nobody could give me a pinpoint, and nobody labeled it dyslexia, let me tell you. As a very, very active parent, taking him to eye tracking for help, getting tested in the public schools, trying to get the IEPs. We went to what in Colorado is called the STAR Center, which is for sensory processing disorder, to help with that. We went to pediatric evaluations through our doctor. I'd had him take achievement tests. The poor kid's seen more psychologists than any average person, for sure. We went to reading specialists like Lyndon Mood Bell to help us with things. We went to speech therapy. We went to like the list is long. Right. And that doesn't even count like reading tutors. But through all of that, nobody could really pinpoint exactly what was going on. And I just want to tell the parents, like, I know you want this to be black and white. I know you want this just to, like, somebody just to tell you so that you can work toward fixing it. And it's I hope that's what you get, but that is not what I got, and at all. And so you are not alone in being frustrated, not understanding what's happening, just so much wanting to help your child, but feeling helpless because you don't know what to do. And so, just number one tip, you're don't give up on that trying to figure out what the real issue is and to keep going back to the help, keep trying to get tested until you can get a much more clearer picture and never giving up on that help. And I know it's expensive and I know like I said, it's just agonizing for you and your child who probably gets exhausted from all the people they have to see and all the effort they have to put in. But this is just where you become their biggest cheerleader and you just got to support them as much as you possibly can and show them your real feelings. Show it's okay to show them that you're frustrated and that you're also tired of taking them to all the appointments because that makes you real and it shows you that you're the parent that, yeah, I'm tired, but I'm not ever going to give up on you. And that alone is being very impactful to your child. So that's my main tip number one. Like, just you can do this. Don't give up. You're not alone. I know it's frustrating.
That's a good tip. I mean, that's what I tell people too. You can quit, but you have to get up every day. So if you want to quit every day, go ahead. But tomorrow you better get back up.
That's right. You absolutely do. And that's what you need to do. And it's just a long journey. And I wish it wasn't, but the reality is that it is. And if you know that, I feel like if anybody watching this can see that and say, okay, these other parents have gone before me. And yes, I definitely could be that biggest cheerleader for my son or my daughter, then you're doing the right thing. And you just, again, keep waking up. Just like you said, keep waking up, keep doing it. So my second tip to be an impactful parent of a dyslexic child is really to kind of take your mind and you got to do a mind shift on everything, and not just for you, but help your child take this challenge, because reading is everywhere and reading is so important in school and in life. And our stupid society has made it so that reading equals being successful. Now, I don't believe that, but that's like the main that's the message that gets across to the majority of our population. So it's about really, really ensuring your child to take the mind shift that this challenge that you have of not liking or not being able or having a difficulty of reading, to not let it define who they are. And it's about creating for your child a super security system that they can rely on. So it's not just about them being able to rely on you to take them for help all the time, but it's also that, again, you're not, and your biggest fan, but that your child can be heard somewhere when the going gets tough and they also want just to throw their hands up in the air. To be that empathetic ear, to say, you can't, I'm not dyslexic, so I can't say, oh, I know what that feels like. No, and I'm not even going to try, but I can say, man, I hear you. And I see how hard you're working. And I know this isn't easy for you, but if you need help from me and I can help you in any way possible, I want to do that. And then not letting this challenge define who they are, which is really happens in school. I see it. I've been an educator for over 20 years, and I've had numerous dyslexic children throughout my classroom time. And it's not letting those students get defined by this learning difference that they have, that they're not any less smart or capable than anyone else in the room. They just have a different challenge, but everybody has a challenge. Theirs happens to be in the classroom when we're reading. To make things more interesting. I'm a language teacher. So I saw it all the time, and it was like night and day who had these differences and who didn't. And it was about really supporting that student in the room, saying, we're going to figure this out. Maybe you have to test auditory with with more auditory testing. Maybe you have to do just more speaking exams instead of written. Maybe I need to put my voice on a I used to do it on tape. That's how old I am. But on a recording, and so that you can listen to the dialogue instead of having to read it. And working with your teachers so that it doesn't define who they are. Because once you figure out that there's an issue, it really becomes one of your missions as a parent to keep revisiting it every single time somebody new comes into their life. That means every single year that they get a new teacher, or even at semester when they switch classes, it's about talking to those teachers and not advocating for your child, but make sure that your child is right there advocating with you, not doing things for them, but doing things with them. And that's really big. And I'm going to say that again. Don't do things for them, do things with them. So don't have a parent-teacher conference, have a parent-teacher-student conference, so that they also learn how to advocate for themselves and to be able to talk to an adult, so that they can say, yeah, that's really difficult for me, but this is something I can do. And so it's a journey again through that also.
That's a really interesting idea. I mean, I know people in high school say to bring the student to the IEP meeting, but what age do you recommend that the child is involved? Because when they're really little, I feel like sometimes the child is used as a block to make the school not necessarily do what they would.
I honestly think it's up to the discretion of the parent, but I had my son next to me as early as possible. And we talk about his learning difference outwardly. He doesn't shame away from it because of it now. He knows it's just part of who he is. And we don't talk about it shamefully either. It's just, this is who you are. We need to get you extra help. Come on with me. We're walking in to talk to the adults so that they can understand where you're coming from. And I bring him in. And yeah, I think when he was really little, it was like, and he didn't say much, but he sat there and just listened, and that's okay. But as he got older, I kept trying to bring him into the conversation and say, so what do you think that you need help with? How do you think the teacher could help you? What do you think you're really good at? And I would literally put him into the conversation with the adult there, so that he can learn to advocate for himself, but still in a safe space where I'm right there with him, and I'm going to be there to support him. I'm going to fight for him. I'm right there, but I'm letting him talk. And I think that's really big. You let your child talk for themselves instead of being, you're still being mama bear, right? But you don't want to be over too much and cast shadow upon your child. So there's a balance there. Instead, you want to put your child right in front of you, but have their back and say, I'm right here. If you need to fall, I got you. And that's more of the kind of parenting I'm trying to encourage.
I love that. I think for us, that was very hard to get my child to do. She did not want to sit in an IEP meeting. She would not speak. She wouldn't say anything. And now we work on that.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, some kids aren't ready yet, and some kids don't feel comfortable yet. But just like with anything you do in life, the more you do it, the more exposure you have to it, the more practice you have, it becomes more comfortable. And unless you expose and you practice, it will never be comfortable. So all those meetings, I drag them along, and no, they'll start to speak up in their own time when they're ready. And I wouldn't force it, but I would bring them there whenever you could.
That is a really good tip, I think. trying to teach them to, because I mean, we know that the statistic says that it's possible they're going to have kids and their kids have a 50% chance of also being dyslexic. So they're going to have to learn how to deal with that when it happens to their family.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of ways, I envy that because at least you have the empathy to be able to identify what maybe your child might be going through. I didn't have that. And I mean, I don't wish dyslexia upon myself, but I do wish I had the empathy to be able to understand what that was like so that I could have maybe even supported him more and better. And then the third tip I have for parents really is just to, as they get older and they do pick an interest, is really support them in their passion, in their interest. For a dyslexic kid, it may not be a conventional path. For example, right now, the big thing is like, STEM, or I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be, all these typical
Coding.
kinds of professions. For my son, I saw him spark with movie making, and it started with him just trying to make like stop motion videos and stuff, and I kind of just like, oh yeah, that's cute, and kids go through all kinds of phases and try on lots of things and try on different hats and stuff. But there was a point when I sat him down and as a sophomore in high school and said, what do you really care about? We need to start honing your passion and really having that conversation with him so that he can start to really focus on one thing and get really good at it. And that really good thing that you're really good at becomes part of their identity. And when that becomes part of their identity, then the challenges in their life become a little less a part of their identity. It ends up being a challenge that they have to overcome or whatever, but who they are is this other bigger passion that they have. So then hopefully by the time that they're older teenagers, the hope is you've cheered them on to be the best they could be, even with this learning difference when they were younger, that by now they're 15, 16, 17 years old. You can now switch your cheerleader focus to the passion and saying, that's your passion. I'm going to support you 100% on your passion. Let's make that happen. And I know for some other people, members of my family, when I was supporting my son in his movie making, it was movie making. Okay, that's a really hard profession to break into. And even my son was like, I don't know, I'm getting a lot of pushback from the family and he cares what other people think. And I sat him down again and said, no, this is your passion. You really enjoy this, right? Yeah, I really enjoy this. Well, then this is really what you enjoy, this is what you love, then don't look at it in such a narrow-minded set. Let's open it up a little bit. Maybe you're not going to be the next Steven Spielberg. That's okay. But could you make commercials? Could you make podcasts? Could you make all these other things that require video and recording and video editing and animation and things? Could you do any of those? Well, yeah, I could. Okay, well, there's a lot of those kind of professions out there. Do you want to shoot for being the next Spielberg? Awesome. But if you realize that that's a very narrow goal, like a professional athlete, but maybe you're happy just being a coach, and then let's continue with it. You can do this. We can hone this talent. And we kept working at it and kept working at it. And to this day, he's very excited. He's 18 now. We're a senior in high school. And now we're looking at colleges that will support his major, along with looking at colleges that are small enough that's going to make him feel comfortable in a classroom at college, have the support systems that he needs in order to feel comfortable with his learning difference. So that will be the next part of my journey, is helping my son move beyond the high school and into an environment where he'll be completely independent, but also supported um, in his new environment. So that's gonna be a whole other thing to tackle for me.
Those are really good tips. It's funny that you say figure it out because that's probably something I've been saying since I was like 10. Like that's my response to everything, figure it out. But I think that it's really important for parents to understand that a lot of people think that you're just dyslexic, and it's extremely uncommon to be only having one, diagnosis because of how complex it is to develop dyslexia. And so I think a lot of parents stop digging when they get labeled with dyslexia and they miss some other things like you're talking about, the sensory processing disorder or ADHD or auditory processing disorder. And a lot of those other things isn't what makes you be able to figure out your child, because you have to understand everything you're dealing with.
So, and a lot of those learning differences, as you know, they come up a lot in second, third, and fourth grade, because that's the turning point in school when you start not reading for fun, but reading to learn.
Correct.
So the comprehension part is super, super important. And if you're having comprehension issues, that's when it's going to really rear its head up. So
Talk about that real quick, because a lot of people don't know about the high rate of anxiety and depression in kids with learning disabilities and how that manifests into you being labeled as a behavior problem when your problem is really that you can't read. Like, how do parents
exactly.
recognize signs of that?
Yeah. So what I do it's a completely online course. And what I do is I help the parents identify what really are the triggers, what's really the issue that's underhand. Because although you're seeing, let's say, anger from your kid, frustrating, getting trouble at school, what's really happening is underneath all of that, there's something else happening. So it's about trying to identify what's all those other things happening. Is it they're not feeling secure? Is it that they're afraid of something that's going to happen or will happen or how it's going to end up? Like there could be a slew of other emotions. And then once we get past identifying the issues and the triggers, I teach parents how to help their children control those big emotions. So we go through processes of learning how to cope, giving them coping skills, learning like actually teaching your child how to increase their tolerance level when they get frustrated, because they will get frustrated. So it's about increasing their tolerance level so that they don't blow their top out, and instead they could get frustrated but not, because you're not going to take away feelings. Feelings are natural. It's about controlling the feelings so that they don't overtake you and make you do things that are crazy. And because what happens, especially with kids that are really frustrated, is they become impulsive, and impulsivity turns into things that are dangerous. And now they're doing things at school or at home or wherever that aren't your kid. So this is what happens when the parents are looking at their child and they're like, wait a second, who is this? You never did that before. Why are you acting out now? And it's about finding out why they're acting out, helping them go through that process, and then learning how to control those emotions so they don't get impulsive. Because if you get to impulsivity, teenagers in general, they'll be impulsive by nature because they just don't have a completely developed brain. And you couple that with anger or something, and now your child can be putting themselves into danger. So to me, it's a real passion of mine to help your child early with that so that they don't put themselves in a dangerous situation. They keep their emotions in check.
And I think a lot of parents miss that sign of like, why did your kid's personality entirely change and what's the problem? Like, unless you have trauma, there's usually not a logical explanation for it. So what would be your number one tip for someone who just found out that they're dyslexic, besides, figuring it out? Like, do you tell people to go get a private tutor, or do you tell them to go to counseling, or what do you suggest for parents that just found out?
Because some of the day-to-day stuff is a little bit more frustrating sometimes than some of the bigger issues. So it could be as little as having somebody read aloud to them certain assignments. Actually, we have websites on all of that. If your
Okay.
community doesn't know about snapandread.com, they should definitely go there. That has lots of, it reads to them. Reading Ally is an amazing resource online where it provides thousands of books online, including textbooks that reads out loud to your child so that they can hear it instead of having to read it. And what I like about it is you can read along with it still, so you don't have to be just listening. One of my favorite websites that my oldest son uses is, let's see, it's ttreader.com. ttsreader.com. That's it. ttsreader.com. And another one that works just the same is naturalreaders.com. And what that does is he takes his own writing. Okay, so when he has to write an essay for something, he takes his own writing, he cuts and pastes it into this website, and then the website reads it back to him as it highlights the words as it's reading back to him. And what that allows him to do is listen for weird sentence structure, wording that might be off. So he's become a better writer through websites like ttsreader.com or naturalreaders.com because he can edit his work, his own work that way.
That's awesome. I haven't heard of that one.
You got this.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.